What exactly was Ledger's message today?
His message was pretty simple, and it's the one we've been hearing for a while, that the merger is good for competition because it will wrap in 5G and such great advancements that'll make the company a stronger competitor to AT&T and Verizon. But it seemed like not everybody was buying it. He fielded a lot of questions from Democrats worried about coverage in rural areas, worried about possible price hikes hiding somewhere within his pledges not to do that.
Gigi, talk to us a little bit more about what lawmakers' biggest concerns are.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think it's important that the concerns at this hearing today were not just from Democrats, they were bipartisan. And as Todd said, there's concerns that when you combine 4 mobile wireless carriers into 3, prices will go up because you're eliminating a competitor. And particularly, there was concern about low-income consumers, because one of the things that have gotten lost in these merger discussions is the fact that if you combine T-Mobile and Sprint, you're combining 3 of the biggest prepaid carriers. So that's Virgin Mobile, Boost Mobile, and Metro PCS. So this will have a disproportionately harsh impact on low-income consumers. And what's fascinating is that in filings at the Federal Communications Commission, Sprint and T-Mobile's economists have said, yeah, we know that this is going to raise prices on low-income consumers, but they use their cell phones a lot, so they'll just bear the cost, which I think is a remarkable admission.
Now, let's take a listen to some of the pushback. Here's a clip from Congressman Mike Doyle. Listen in.
That would take the prepaid market from where it is right now at $24.67, which is just under DOJ's threshold, to $44.81, a level that raises lots of red flags. These kinds of numbers have historically resulted in higher prices for consumers, less competition, and less innovation.
Now, that said, Todd, didn't John Ledger in this hearing promise that prices wouldn't go up?
He said it a couple different ways, but after the hearing, I talked to Doyle, and Doyle's not convinced. And Doyle wants the regulators, the Federal Communications Commission and the Justice Department, to take a quick look. There's lots of, or take a deep look at it. There's a lot of different ways to make pledges about prices and a lot of ways to adjust the prices after and say, oh, gee, look, you've got a lower price considering what you've got. And it's just not trusted right now by some in Washington.
Gigi, is this a promise that if this happens, that Ledger would actually be held to?
So this is interesting. So T-Mobile has made a 3-year pricing commitment, promising not to change the prices of rate plans. Now, there are so many loopholes in that you could just drive a truck through it, right? They could change their data caps. They could, increase their network quality and increase charges there. They could increase third-party charges. So that quote-unquote pricing commitment is no commitment at all. But there's a more important point. Particularly in this administration, policymakers have already said, the Assistant Attorney General, Makan Delrahim, has already said, we do not want to be overseeing merger commitments. We do not want to be acting as a regulator and looking at whether companies are abiding by their behavioral commitments. So there's no appetite for behavioral merger conditions, and frankly, they don't work. They didn't work in the Comcast-NBCU merger. In fact, Bloomberg was one of the unfortunate non-beneficiaries of that. They don't work in other mergers, and particularly in this administration, nobody wants to be in the business, neither the FCC nor the Justice Department, of essentially engaging in price regulation.
Now, Ledger had quite a few pronouncements at this hearing. Take a listen to this one about Huawei.
Let me be clear. There is no Huawei or ZTE equipment in our network today, and there never will be. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever.
Of course, T-Mobile has been involved in a case involving Huawei and allegations that they stole intellectual property from T-Mobile having to do with robotic technology. Todd, what do you make of that pronouncement there from Ledger?
I think it's one that he could easily make. As he even said that we have a history with that company, indicating a bit of distaste with Huawei given their legal entanglements. There was a recent indictment of Huawei by U.S. officials alleging that Huawei stole T-Mobile trade secrets. But one thing you can say is that there's the pledge for T-Mobile itself in the United States, deal opponents look to the parent corporation, SoftBank in Japan and Deutsche Telekom in Germany, and say, gee, look, there is Huawei gear there. So the influence is arm's length, and maybe that's not far enough, say critics.
Last quick question, Gigi. Can Sprint survive without this deal?
Absolutely. The notion that Sprint is a failing firm is nonsense. They're not even an ailing firm. They just put out their third quarter financials just 2 weeks ago, and they are gaining subscribers in the lucrative postpaid market. Their revenues are increasing across the board in both prepaid and postpaid. They've invested over $1.4 billion in their new networks. And there's nothing about their financials, frankly, for the last several quarters that make anybody think, or should make anybody think, that Sprint is anywhere near failing. And in fact, they're really on the uprise. So there's no need to have this merger. The promises that these companies are making, they're not merger specific. They haven't proven that they'd actually come to be. And the harms to consumers far outweigh the alleged benefits of this deal.